suppresses the Russian debt. Russia's economy is not just under pressure. It's not just going through a difficult year. And it's definitely not some stable fortress that can absorb endless costs forever. No. No matter how many times Russian officials repeat that everything is under control, no, absolutely not. The real problem is much deeper. Russia has entered a trap where the war economy is no longer just something the government funds. It is becoming the thing that keeps the whole system moving. Military factories need contracts, regions need bonus payments, workers need defense sector salaries, banks need the government to pretend risky loans are safe, and the Kremlin needs ordinary Russians to believe that this is all normal. And all it needs is just one single part of this whole system to become unstable in order to collapse this entire fragile house of cards. And here is the biggest problem. When your economy depends on spending money on things that do not create a productive future, you can make the numbers look active for a while, but you cannot make the system healthy forever. And now Russia's banks are showing exactly this strain. Around 11% reportedly of Russia's corporate debt is considered problem debt, which equals roughly 131 billion US dollars. That is already above the 10% threshold often associated with the systemic risk. In normal language, this means that the banking problem is no longer some small fire in the corner. It is starting to spread through the entire structure. And the scariest part, for Moscow at least, is that ordinary Russians can feel it already. They may not understand every hidden budget category, every regional subsidy, or even defensive loans, but they understand when prices for them personally rise, when payments fail, when cash suddenly matters again, and when the government starts blocking communication tools like it is preparing for public panic. So today, let's talk about why Russia's banking system is becoming one of the most important hidden front lines in this war. Here is where it gets incredibly interesting, because the best historical comparison is not just a normal recession. It is the trap Nazi Germany entered during Second World War, not because the situations are identical, but because the economic mechanism is extremely similar. And you can trick people, but just you cannot trick numbers. When Germany entered World War II, it was spending around 25% of its GDP on the military. As the war continued, that rose to around 40%. By the final stage, it reached roughly 75%. At that point, the civilian economy was no longer the real foundation of the country, obviously. The military machine was. The Nazis called it total war, but behind the dramatic phrase was just a very simple reality. The longer the war continued, the more civilian sectors became unprofitable or even just stopped mattering at all. Workers, materials, transport, credit, and political attention moved towards military production. Normal businesses weakened, and the state just kept pulling more of the economy into the war machine. Eventually, Germany did not just want to continue the war, it just needed to continue the war, because the economy had been rebuilt around it. That is the trap Russia is moving towards right now. Military spending can make GDP look strong, but not all GDP is equal. If a country builds civilian infrastructure, technology, housing, logistics, or productive factories, that can obviously make tomorrow stronger. But if the economy is increasingly built around producing things that are used up quickly in the war and then completely destroyed, then the graphs may show activity while the country's real future gets weaker. Russia is now spending huge amounts on military production, the defensive factories, recruitment bonuses, regional payments as well, and the war-related support systems in general. That money keeps people employed and creates the illusion of stability, but it also destroys civilian industries and pulls workers away from normal economic life. And once the war economy becomes a support beam, it becomes dangerous to remove it at all. If the war continues, the system becomes even more distorted. If the war slows down, many people, regions, factories, and banks suddenly face the question nobody in Moscow wants to answer. What happens when the military money stops flowing? And that's not just a budget problem, that is a structural trap. And it gets even worse when the income supporting this whole machine starts shaking. I don't know about you, but looks like Russian economy might just need some donations, I guess, right? And speaking about donations, if you want to help our channel rely less on YouTube volatility, feel free to check the links down below. There are PayPal donations, Patreon memberships with extra daily content, and obviously the Russian dude merch, for example, such as this hoodie. Everything helps tremendously. All the links are down below. Once again, thanks so much. Let's continue. Now here is the important part. Russia could survive this distorted war economy for longer if money kept flowing in smoothly. But Ukraine has been attacking one of Russia's weakest economic points: the oil and gas export terminals on the Black Sea and Baltic Sea, where energy exports are loaded into Russia's shadow fleet. This matters because Russia still needs energy income, it needs hard currency, it needs export revenue to support the budget, fund the war economy, stabilize the system, and maintain at least the appearance that everything is under control, as they like to say in Kremlin. When Ukraine keeps these facilities offline, disrupts shipping, raises repair costs, insurance policies, and just in general complicates export logistics, it hits the part of Russia's system that brings money in. So Russia faces a double squeeze, as you can see. On one side, it is spending more on the military, factories, bonuses, regional support, domestic security and propaganda, while on the other side, its income is pressured by sanctions, price caps, logistical problems, and Ukrainian law and grant operations against this critical infrastructure. You obviously, when you look at all this, you do not need a PhD in economics to understand the problem. If you spend more money on things that do not build long-term productivity while bringing in less money from the sectors that fund your system, I mean, isn't it obvious that eventually the math becomes just brutal? This is why the banking disruption in early April and May was so revealing. It was not caused by an actual financial collapse, it was reportedly linked to a technical glitch connected to Russia's attempt to shut down VPN services. Basically what happened is that for a very short time people simply could only pay with cash. And so, what happened as a result of this insignificant seemingly inconvenience? Guess what? Rumors started spreading almost immediately. People feared that banks are about to be running. Some Russians wondered whether the government was preparing restrictions to stop people from withdrawing their own money. And that reaction tells you absolutely everything you should know. If a technical glitch instantly makes people think about bank controls, then confidence is already weak in the system. People may still repeat the official language of stability, but privately they perfectly understand that something is wrong. The government understands this too. That is why it has been tightening informational control, blocking VPNs, pressuring internet services, and restricting communication tools like Telegram. The Kremlin knows that economic fear becomes more dangerous when people can communicate quickly, compare their experiences, and then organize as a result. So the problem is financial at this point, but it is also psychological. Russian citizens may not know every single detail, but they know when prices rise, when payment systems fail, when credit becomes tighter, and when officials start acting nervous. And that brings us to the hidden part of the war economy, because Russia's official military budget is only the cleanest looking part of this much dirtier history story. Here's the catch. When people ask how much Russia is really spending on the military, the honest answer is that nobody outside the deepest parts of the system knows the exact number. Russia has the official number, and then Russia has the real number that not too many people know. Officially, Russia spends about 7 to 7.5% of GDP on military. That is already high. The United States, for example, spends around 3.5% of GDP on defense. So Russia's official figure is already more than double than the American level according to the most conservative Kremlin estimates. And 7.5% does not sound catastrophic comparing to Nazi Germany's 25, 40 or eventually 75%. And that is exactly why Moscow likes this number so much. It sounds serious, but at the same time manageable. The problem is that major war costs are hidden outside the official federal military budget. One of the biggest examples is just capital expenditure. When the Russian government buys military equipment, the budget may show the price of the unit coming off the production line, that's it. But it may not show the full cost of the factory expansion, machinery, infrastructure, and loans required to make that production even possible in the first place. A defense contractor can go to a Russian bank and, for example, get a huge loan for a politically important defense project which has to be approved. And the bank may be pressured to just provide it. The contractor builds the facility, the government buys the output, and everything looks functional while the war continues. But what happens if the facility becomes unprofitable later? What happens if the contractor cannot repay the loan? The bank is left just holding the problem. And because the loan was made for defensive needs, the Russian government eventually becomes the final backstop. So the cost does not disappear, it just moves from the official budget to the banking system. This is exactly why Russia's real military spending could be closer to 15 or even 20% of GDP once those hidden costs, defense-linked loans, regional bonuses and indirect obligations are all included. And if Russia's economy shrinks in real term while military needs keep rising, that share could jump even higher. Regional bonuses are also another hidden pressure point. Many payments to soldiers are pushed into regional governments, including poor regions that are already financially weak. A region, for example, pays bonuses it cannot, really afford, and then later needs help Moscow to keep functioning. Well, again, as you can see, the cost is real, even if it appears somewhere else. This is just, classic Kremlin accounting. Move the costs, delay the consequences, rename the support program, and pretend that the official number tells the whole story, that it's only 7%, guys, don't worry. But banks cannot escape reality forever. Russian banks are becoming shock absorbers for the war economy. They are expected to finance defensive operations, expansions, carry risky loans, support politically important industries, and pretend that these debts are manageable. That is why the 11% problem debt figure matters so much. Once again, roughly $131 billion in corporate debt is now considered extremely problematic. And that puts the system beyond the 10% threshold often associated with systemic risk. So the question is no longer whether the banking system is under stress. The question is what kind of a crisis Russia is trying to avoid. Now here's where most people go wrong. When they imagine a banking crisis, they picture people lining up outside banks, ATMs, running out of cash, and just one dramatic moment when everyone realizes that the system is in trouble. Well, potentially that could happen, but Russia may not collapse in that cinematic way. The government still has, tools to prevent classic bank runs, at least for a while. It can impose withdrawal limits, use capital controls, pressure banks to restrict movement of money, offer state-backed guarantees, and just, in general, flood television with confident messages that, you guessed it, everything's under control. Those guarantees may not be as strong as people think, but they can at least slow down the panic because people want to believe that their savings are protected. A better comparison here may be Japan actually in the 1990s. Japan had a major debt problem, banks were carrying bad loans, and companies that should have failed were kept alive. The government avoided sudden collapse by restructuring debt and delaying pain. The result was not an immediate disaster, it was just stagnation. The economy stayed stable in a boring way, but growth was weak, banks had less room to lend to productive new companies, capital was just trapped in old problems, and the country lost years of opportunity, but yeah, technically, they kinda were able to save themselves. That may be what Russia is trying to engineer. Not prosperity, not real growth, but at least manage stagnation. Keep the banks alive, keep major companies alive, restructure debt, delay losses, and blame outside enemies and hope that the public stays too tired or distracted to connect the dots and use complicated economic language so nobody would even care. Extend and pretend, basically. That is the strategy. But Russia has one giant problem Japan did not have in the 1990s. Japan was not fighting a massive war that consumed a large share of national resources every single year. Russia is. So Russia is trying to manage a banking problem while also spending heavily on the military, facing sanctions, dealing with the labor shortages, losing access to parts of global technology markets, watching civilian sectors weaken, and ultimately defending energy infrastructure that Ukraine is increasingly able to disrupt. That makes the Russian version so much uglier. Japan's stagnation happened in a very rich, advanced, globally integrated economy. Russia's version, on the other hand, is happening inside a sanctioned wartime economy where banks, regions, workers and companies are all being pushed into the political decisions. So yes, the Kremlin may potentially avoid a sudden visible banking collapse, it may stop people from withdrawing too much money, it may even keep weak banks alive on paper, but avoiding the dramatic version of collapse does not mean avoiding the consequences. It only means that the crisis becomes slower, quieter and more corrosive, and sooner or later it passes the point of no return. And now this detail that we left for the end changes everything, because Russia's economy does not need to fall apart tomorrow morning for the damage to be real. The system only needs to keep degrading month after month while the Kremlin insists that the headline numbers prove strength. The longer the war continues, the more Russia has to spend to maintain the war economy. The more it spends, the more civilian sectors get pushed out, the more those sectors weaken, the more workers, banks, factories and regions depend on military-linked money. And the more dependent they become, the harder it becomes for Moscow to step away without creating financial and social pain. This is exactly how countries lose flexibility. They do not always wake up one day with no options. They remove those options slowly themselves. Russia's official numbers may still look polished, state television may still talk about resilience, officials may still claim sanctions failed, but behind this performance, the system is becoming increasingly fragile. Banks are carrying more risk, problem debt has entered dangerous territory, military costs are hidden through bank loans, regional obligations and off-budget pressure. Oil and gas infrastructure is under strain. Communication tools are even being restricted because the Kremlin knows that the economic fear can very quickly turn into a political one. And ordinary Russians are already sensitive enough that one payment disruption in early April, we spoke about briefly previously, it all just already created rumors about bank runs and financial controls. That does not, once again, mean that Russia collapses tomorrow. It only means that the pressure points are now clearly visible. This is why Ukraine's strategy matters. Every day Russia spends more, earns less, repairs more, borrows more, controls more and hides more. Ukraine's long-term position improves. Wars are not decided only by the frontline movements. They are also decided by whether the system behind the front can keep supplying money, equipment, workers, fuel, credit and political calm. And this is the part that Moscow cannot easily solve. You can print unlimited amount of money, but you cannot print productivity. You can force banks to lend, but you cannot force bad loans to just suddenly become good and attractive ones. You can hide costs inside regional budgets, but you cannot make poor regions rich by pretending that the obligations are manageable. That is why the total war comparison matters, not because Russia is exactly Germany, but because its mechanisms are similar. As the war expands, the economy becomes more dependent on war spending. As the economy becomes more dependent on war spending, the leadership becomes more trapped by the need to continue. Germany was eventually rebuilt in the West after Second World War with the help of the Marshall Plan, because there was a strategic decision that a ruined Germany would be extremely dangerous for Europe. But will anyone want to rescue Russia's economy after this war? Will Western governments want to rebuild a system that spent years using energy, banks, propaganda and military pressure as tools of confrontation? Will Russia even accept the reforms needed to recover? Or will it just become poorer, more isolated and more militarized than before? That is the question Moscow does not want to answer, hopefully for them ever. Guys, if today's video helped you understand why Russia's banking crisis could become one of the most important hidden front lines of this war, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Don't forget about the Patreon, donations links, merch, everything is down below, all the links. Thanks so much, see you on Friday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims.